Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Today we're going to take a look at Friese's Landlord, and one thing I'll point out as I was putting together this review, I realized that I hadn't reviewed a single Freedom and Friese game yet, which is probably a criminal act in some part of the world, because Freedom and Friese is a very well-known designer, and while I haven't played a lot of his games, I have a great deal of respect for him because he always puts a unique theme, at least most of his games, and he always puts some sort of weird spin on it. He tries something new and different each time, and I have a lot of respect for that. One of these days, I'll get around to reviewing Friday, which is a fantastic solitaire game. I think I put it on my top 100 list. I hope I did. And Landlord itself has a very unique theme, too, where you are essentially a slumlord, and you're trying to just get as much money as you can from your tenants. It's not a very complicated theme, but it is one that hasn't been explored quite a bit in board games that I know of. And actually, this game is a re-implementation of his original version of this game from like 1992, which had much more primitive art style and look to it. So if nothing else, this definitely is better off for having a graphical overhaul. But is the gameplay good? I'm going to give a brief overview of how it works, then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Friese's Landlord. This is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. The goal of the game is to have the most money at the end. Money is victory points, in other words, but it's also what you're going to need to use in order to get more cards from the deck, so there's an interesting dynamic there. Now, in this game, you play a landlord, and you're trying to build apartment buildings and put tenants into the building. Therefore, you're going to get income, although, oddly enough, even empty apartments will give you money. Doesn't make sense to me, but maybe I'm missing something. So each player is going to start with 5 cards from the deck. You're also going to start, I neglected to do this, but you will start with 3 coins out of the bank. This is the starting money that you have, although really it's just victory points, since you're not going to be able to use your starting money for anything else, although you may potentially use it for building roofs or for some other cards may make you lose it. So I guess you can't use it for other things. Never mind what I just said. So when it's your turn, you'll decide who's going to go first, and you can essentially take all the cards that you have, and I'll break those down in a second and tell you what they all are, and you can play as many of them as you want. Now, some cards, if you choose to play them face down, they become floors in the start of an apartment building. And you can try and build as many apartments as you want in a turn, but you must complete an apartment in the same turn that you started. So let's say that I wanted to build an apartment here. I just want to make it 2 floors tall. Then I cap it off with one of these roof cards that I have off to the side. Now, the first roof that you build is free. But if you want to build more buildings, the second building that you have, the roof is going to cost you 1 coin. The third one is going to cost you 2 coins, and so on, just like that. But the first one is always free. Then the other thing that you can do is you can try to populate your building with tenants. So if you have one of those, you'll keep them over on their tenant side and you'll put them into the floor. Now, tenants have restrictions. Some of them need to be in buildings that are only up to a certain limit, and they don't want to be in buildings taller than that. Some of them want to be on lower floors, some of them want to be on upper floors, and so on. And some of them are negative, and you don't want them in your building. You might want to put them in another player's building. Now, the other type of card that you can potentially play during this turn are action cards. And action cards will always give you some sort of effect. They might be a moving card that'll move someone out of the building. They might be a bomb that'll blow up someone's building. There's also cards that are essentially cards that you play in response to someone hitting you with a negative card, and you play them and prevent that negative effect from happening, like alibi or court. So that's kind of how the game is going to go. You're going to be building different buildings, capping them off with roofs, and then trying to put tenants in there. And then the final phase of everyone's turn, they're going to get income for those buildings. So let's say that, let's just do a quick example here. I'm probably not following all the rules for placement here, but I just want to show you how it would look like. So if this was my placement at the end of probably my second turn, then I would look at the income that each of these gives me. So in this case, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 coins. I would take 7 coins from the bank, and I think that the oranges are red. Now, immediately, before I fully put these into my stock of victory point coins, I have the option of spending these coins to purchase cards from the deck. And for most of the game, you really do want to do that. Now, cards 1 through 5 are just going to cost you 1 coin each. But every coin after that is going to be more expensive. They're going to be 2 coins each for every card over 5. And you can never choose to spend more than what you're just gaining in income. In other words, you can't spend the victory points that you already accumulated on previous turns. Those can only be used for roofs and if something else makes you lose them. So you'll take however many cards that you're purchasing, and then you will keep the rest, and then that's going to end your turn. It goes to the next player. You're going to keep going like this until the deck of cards runs out. Whoever takes the last card, everyone else is going to get one more turn, including that person. Then the game is going to end. You're going to see how many victory point coins you've stowed over the course of the game, and that's it. Now let's take a closer look at some of the cards that are in the game. Alright, so first off, you probably saw this off to the side. The jail card goes in, it's not something that ever goes into the deck. It's something that you keep off to the side. And when someone is put into jail, you put this card in front of them. Now, this is going to happen if you do an illegal act and someone catches you. If you try to bomb someone or murder someone, and which can happen, we'll get to that in a second, and then they put the police on you, then you're going to have to go to jail. When you're in jail, you cannot accrue rent at the end of the turn. You only gain a minimum of 2 coins, which is the minimum money you can ever get during your turn. And by the way, I did forget that that's important. I'll have to amend that. But every empty apartment gives you a coin as well. But in any case, that's if you get stuck in jail, you don't get rent at the end of your turn. You only get the minimum of 2. And then at the beginning of your turn, you can spend 5 coins in order to get out of jail. Otherwise, you're stuck in there again. There are cards in the game that are actually add-ons to your apartments. So you have like the attic apartment here, which you'll actually put, it caps off a building. It counts as a roof in a way. And see, it says over here, it finishes a building. But also, it counts as an apartment so people can occupy it. And by the way, I'll talk about this in my final thoughts, but they don't give you much information about what cards do on the card itself. For most of this, you have to refer back to the rule book, but for this purpose, I'm just going to give you the quick rundown that it has on the card. So here's another example of an expansion. This is the basement expansion. This can go underneath the bottom floor of one of your apartments, and it also counts as an apartment as well. So here's some of the tenants. These are the horizontal tenants. So these can just go directly onto a normal apartment floor as usual. Now over here, it gives you how much income they're going to give you for you every round. And this is up to the limit of how many floors high of a building this person is willing to live in, which is 5, which is the max anyways, I believe. Now over here it says prefers other hackers. Hackers, like other hackers in the building, they give you an escalating amount of coins depending on how many hackers are in the building. Mother with children can only live in a building that's 4 or less, and they can be evicted. The musicians, they can only live in a building that is 3 or less, and if they move in, if there's other tenants already in the building, the other tenants will move out into your other buildings. But if people move in afterwards, it's fine. The odd ones, they can only live with odd ones, of course. They give you 3 income. The tavern, there can be no wealthy residents in the tavern. Then we go to the scientist. The scientist is kind of a weird one. The scientist has to be on the top of a building, and he creates monsters. Now, monsters are these cards here, which you keep off to the side. Every round, he's going to keep making monsters and occupying your buildings with them, which is actually not too bad. Then we have the vertical tenants, which function the same as the horizontal ones, except that they're going to take up 2 floors of one of your buildings. So here we have the family who's giving you 5 income. However, they tell on you. If you do any illegal acts, they'll immediately call the police on you, and you'll be stuck in jail potentially. The nobles can only go in a 1-floor house, and they are just simply rich. They give you 6 wealth. Now, how does that work, you say? Well, that's where you have to have an expansion, either a basement or an attic or rooftop expansion in order for them to go in. Then we have the group house. The group house gives you 4 income, and they are immune to murder. Well, that's good. Wouldn't you all like to be immune to murder? Here we have the squatters. You would never put squatters in your own building. You put them in another player's building because they can acquire no rents from that building so long as there are squatters in it, and the other tenants start slowly moving out. Here's the action cards. We have move. You can move any tenant to any apartments, to an empty apartment. Your own or someone else's. Eviction. Hey, that guy looks familiar, and that sign looks familiar. Anyways. Eviction card, you can actually force all tenants, except for the squatters, of course, to leave any building the affected player takes all tenants back into their hand. The bombs card, you get to blow up a building, and you shuffle all the affected cards and place them below the draw pile. Murder, you just bury any tenant below the draw pile. Demolitions, kind of the same thing as bomb. You get to destroy an entire building. All the cards go back to that player's hand, however, so slightly less worse than a bomb. The police, you play this card if you would be affected by the bomb, murder, or squatters. You're not affected, but that person goes to jail, essentially. Court, this is going to prevent you from having to go to jail when you're investigated by the police. Instead, the player on your left is investigated, or you can simply use this to get yourself out of jail without spending 5 coins. And the lunatic, if you are affected by the bomber or murder card, you can play this card instead. And instead, the effect affects the original player who tried to use it on you. So that's Friese's Landlord. You are just trying to be the best darn slumlords you could possibly be. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Alright, well, I already said in my intro that I enjoy the theme of being a landlord / slumlord. Not all landlords are slumlords, just most of them. But, and I think that this is something that hasn't been explored a lot in board games. I mean, this game, like I said, actually came out back in 1992, which goes to my theory that Friese is kind of on the forefront of coming up with unique themes, because I don't think many people were coming up with a theme like that back in 1992. And although it looked really rough, I've seen pictures of that original version. The artwork certainly looks better now, but most of the card text and what the cards do seems to have carried over to this version, the new Friese's Landlord version. And about that, the artwork, I really, really like it. It looks great. I like the sort of indie Euro comic feel that the artwork on the Tenants has. It's something that he's used, I think he's used this artist in other games, including maybe Funny Friends. It certainly reminds me of that artwork. A game that I own but I haven't played yet that's out of print, but it also has a unique theme, much more risque. But I like that quite a bit. I will say that one clunky thing, kind of a necessary evil with the graphic design on the cards, is that there's very little text on the cards. Maybe 1 or 2 lines telling you what it does. But it's really just reminding you what it does, because there's much more information that is required to use the card that you have to constantly be looking in the rulebook for. Now, this goes away after the first couple of games, because there's not that many cards, not many unique cards, and it's easy to memorize what they do, but it's going to be kind of a problem your first couple of games. And I remember in our very first game, we were getting near the end, and we'd constantly been looking up what the cards do, and someone said, okay, I was hitting someone with a bomber card, and someone said, well, I'm going to play the lunatic card. So I was hitting someone with the bomber card, and I was going to put the police suspicion on him, and he was going to play a lunatic card to make me be the target of my original effect. And we were like, are you sure it works that way? Oh yeah, I looked it up before. Well, okay, no one felt like double checking him at that point. We'd all been looking up rules, and as it turns out, he could only have used that if he was being the target. So, you know, I ended up winning anyway, so it wasn't a huge deal. But there's going to be instances like that, or if not, it's because you're constantly checking the rules for the first couple of games. But again, it's a necessary evil because the cards need to look a certain way in order to be attractive and look that way in your apartment and actually fit into the different spots without being totally cluttered with text and make no sense out on the table. So it's kind of a nitpicky thing, but it is something to be aware of. As far as the gameplay goes, I've said it before and I've said it again on my channel. I love card games. I mean, I love card games in general as just sort of a broad sweeping category, much more than a quote-unquote board game of putting pieces out on a board. But one of the things I love most about card games is when you have a game that lets you use a card for multiple different things. And it's one of the reasons why I love Imperial Settlers so much, enough that even though it just came out last year, near the end of the year, it skyrocketed to my top 10, my top 100 of all time, because I really just enjoy that mechanism of using a card for making a deal and building it, and using it to build other buildings. There's lots of different things you can do with a card. Now, Friese's Landlord is much simpler than that game, but it's still cool because you can use a card both as a floor in an apartment building, and you can build multiple apartments if you want, but you have to finish an apartment the turn that you start it and slap a roof on top of it, and the roofs get more expensive as you go along, so you have to worry about that. But you can use your cards as floors in an apartment, or you can use them as tenants potentially, if that's what's on the other side. And tenants follow different structures, so you have to make sure that you have or follow rules. So you have to make sure that each of your structures has a different amount of floors, and that they might want to prefer to be on the bottom floor. Hackers like to be with each other, and that is one smelly building, let me tell you. But so I really enjoy that aspect of the game and how you can use this card for multiple things. And then you have the screw you and don't screw me cards that prevent the screw you cards from being used against you. And that's probably the thing that I like least about the game, is that there are some really devastating cards that people can hit you with. Like I kind of alluded to the bomber card before, where you can blow up someone's building, or the demolition card, or just making people move their tenants out. And you're like, well, it's not just that I'm losing that, now you're gaining that. That's kind of frustrating, and you are at the mercy of the cards that come out of the deck, so maybe you never get a moving card. The first game that I played, I never got a single card that let me move anybody. I got other cards that were really useful, but people kept taking them from me, which can be a frustrating experience. I don't think it's all that bad, though, because it is a light game. It's not too long. I think even your first game, maybe 40 minutes just to get the hang of, because you're constantly referring to the rule book. After a couple of games, you're at a half hour, maybe less, as people just zing through it. That was our experience, at least. And so maybe I didn't care about the take that elements as much as I would have in other games, because it still felt like the game was coming to a conclusion. The game is still fast because of the fact that you're milling through that deck, and when that deck runs out, that's it. You have that one final round, and you can't just you're not working towards a goal that, like Munchkin style, that people are going to constantly be stomping on you to keep you from reaching. So it reaches a natural end, and that's probably a big reason of why I like the game. And it's a game that I enjoy. I'm going to keep it in my collection because I enjoy the theme, I enjoy the artwork, I like the style of it, and the idea of it is very unique. And you have fun and whimsical stuff like the mad scientists making monsters, and the odd ones, and the hackers I talked about before. So I like it. I think the take elements won't be for everybody, and some people are going to hate that they emphasized graphic design over mechanical design as far as the text and things like that. But I think that those are minor faults, if I can even talk, in an otherwise pretty surprisingly solid, fun, light game. That is Friese's Landlord.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.